my game, I should have y'all compete against each other. Let me think of a
We're not doing
category.
Black love today because my mother is here and she does not need to see how I act in some of these spaces. And Ife doesn't play fair all the time, and we don't want to waste 1 minute of this precious time today.
Whatever. Dr. Cokley did good when I did it with him. Whatever. Okay.
I beat you the first 2 times now. Don't play.
She tried to change the rules. She gonna tell
I,
me I'm supposed to be the one asking the questions. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am a licensed psychologist and executive director of a healing paradigm, which is based in Muskogee territory that is also known as Atlanta, Georgia. And I am so excited. This has actually been a process that has been long in the making. It is the introduction to our series, Confronting Anti-Blackness and Creating Psychological Wellbeing. And this entire series is based on a book that is a brilliant brainchild of our guest today, Dr. Kevin Cokley. And we're going to get into the book a little bit in a second. The book is called Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. And we are going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. But before we do that, I want to thank a million times one of my colleagues that I have been blessed to work with over the years, Dr. Monique Earl Lewis, who is an associate professor and Africana Studies at Morehouse
Africana
College?
Studies, yes, trained as an organizational psychologist, but in Africana Studies.
And the director of the Faculty Development Teaching and Advising Center at Morehouse College. Dr. Earl Lewis has been gracious enough to partner with us around this series that will last this year. And so I want to turn it over initially to Dr. Earl Lewis, who is going to bring us greetings from Morehouse College. And then she is going to introduce our speaker.
Greetings, all. Good morning to those of you who are not in the Eastern Standard Time, and good afternoon to all of my colleagues. I bring you greetings from Morehouse College. David Thomas, President, Dr. Kendrick Brown, Provost, and Dr. Clarissa Myrick Harris, the Dean of Humanities, History, and Africana Studies. I want to begin by first acknowledging the great work, the life work of our ancestors, foot soldiers, diviners, and prayer warriors, who without them, we would not be. Ashe. I would like to thank Dr. Ojelade and acknowledge the amazing clinical warriors and staff at A Healing Paradigm for being our frontline workers in addressing the mental health needs and working to cultivate the Black genius and advance excellence in the critical healing work they do every day. I am also so very excited for the great honor of sharing this quintessential moment with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Kevin Cokley. As a person of faith, investing love with unshakable hope is the work that Dr. Cokley does. He is a living example of to whom much is given, much is required. It is through his vision and tenacious spirit that we are blessed today to begin this journey through this well-written, well-researched, and edited praxis story guide to understand, confront, combat, and construct healing as people of African descent. Because he is here, because you are here, because we are here. This is the work we must do without apology and without permission. So the words of our dear brother Langston Hughes echoed loudly in my spirit as I began to move through this compilation of this digital masterpiece. And it reverberates in my soul today from my childhood as we celebrate Black History 365. The words of our brother Langston Hughes. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when the company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Dr. Cokley truly needs no introduction, as he has dedicated his career to serving as a leader in advancing his love for the survival and prosperity in his liberation work through self-knowledge of and love for all. As a psychologist, academician, researcher, SABA scholar, and wisdom servant leader. So at this time, it is indeed my honor to introduce to some and to present to others our brother, Dr. Kevin Cokley, community healer and editor of Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. So as you come to the table today, eat well, grow strong. Thank you again for being a part of this.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Earl Lewis.
Thank you.
Okay, let me pull myself together because I'm like straight up tearing. That is like a beautiful introduction. Wow. Oh, it is such an honor, one, to just hear those words being spoken about you and to have participated just in a small bit on this journey in terms of doing this book. Make it, oof. Okay, let me not pretend. Let me just have that moment that I think that our people just need sometimes. My brother, Dr. Kevin Cokley. It has really been an honor to just watch you speak truth to power in so many ways, in very courageous ways, when people have been harmful. Over the years, I've watched your editorials looking at issues of racism, issues of just anti-Blackness within the community. And you have been brave, and I don't use that word lightly. You have been brave in speaking out in terms of your scholarship and in terms of just op-ed pieces. And I really want to just thank you first and foremost for the work that you do, because it is so much needed right now. So thank you. Tell me a little bit about how you started on this journey for this book, Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. How did that come about?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for really just this entire project. I am beyond humbled that you think that this book is significant enough to warrant an entire professional development podcast series. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Earl Lewis, for that very, very, generous introduction. As I was listening to her, I wondered who she was talking about, because I couldn't imagine that she was talking about me, but she apparently was talking about me. So thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. So how did this book project come about? And there is a story. I was, I'm an academic. I'm a professor. I enjoy the life of the mind as a professional living. So in that way, I'm very fortunate to be able to sort of think and write on behalf of the liberation and survival of our people. And I was contacted by a representative of Cognella Publishers. And it was really in the wake of the events of the summer of 2020, after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And as we all know, there was so much going on in terms of just civil uprisings and protests, and people really wanted to, sort of subtly sort of have this conversation, and really more than a conversation, but to act on these, many injustices that have befallen our communities in particular. So I was contacted by a representative from Cognella who really felt compelled to want, as a publishing company, to do something to address this historical moment. And so they had the idea of putting together some type of book that would address this historical moment. It was just an idea. It wasn't fleshed out. But they wanted someone that they felt like could really bring this vision to fruition. And for some reason, I was the first person that they thought about, and I say that really seriously because there are many wonderful, much more senior, much more accomplished, sort of African scholars, Black scholars out there who could have done this, but for whatever reason, they were drawn to me, and they told me about their vision, and they asked me if I would consider leading this initiative, and I was excited. I asked if I could just sort of think about it for a few days because I really wanted to make sure that it was something that I could fully take on given my schedule. It didn't take me long to sort of make a decision because this was really the opportunity of a lifetime, because they told me that the book was entirely within my creative vision in terms of what the title would be, what the contents would be, whatever I wanted to do with the book, I could do with their support. And I was like, wow, that doesn't happen very often. And so I said, you know what, I have to take advantage of this opportunity that was gifted to me, that has fallen in my lap. And so that's where it started. And so then I had to take time to think about, what is it that I want to do with this book? What should its focus be? How should I approach it? And and the first thing I had to do was to try to think of a title, because in my creative writing process, it's important for me to have a title, or at least a working title in mind, because then that sort of directs my efforts in terms of how I approach any given sort of writing project. And it took me a long time, it took me a long time to sort of think of a title. And I think I was overthinking it because I was trying to be really fancy. I was trying to be clever. And I just sort of, I had different things that came to mind. And just for various reasons, nothing was working. And then I had to sort of just be still and say, you know what, don't overthink this. What is it that you really want to communicate? I said, I want to communicate that Black lives matter. And beyond that, how can we make Black lives matter? And so I said, let me just start with that idea, making Black lives matter. And then the second part of that sort of thinking was, well, how do I want to go about making Black lives matter? Well, we have to confront head on the anti-Black racism that's imperiling us. And so it was really just sort of thinking through, what message do I want to communicate with this book? And so I came up, finally I came up with the title, Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. So once I came up with the title, then I started to think about the contents of the book. And one of the things that the publisher said to me was, again, they wanted this book to be different. They wanted it to be diverse, again, within sort of my vision. And so as I thought through that, I knew that I did not want it to be a traditional academic book. In other words, I didn't want it to be just a book of folks who are academics, just continuing to do that academic writing. Not that that's not important and not needed, but I want this book to be something more than that. And so I wanted this book to include the voices of the community. I wanted this book to include the voices of practitioners. I wanted this book to speak to broad swaths of the Black community that have a story to tell, that have something important to say. And so once I got that in mind, then I started to be able to sort of flesh out more about the specific contents of the book. But I had to sort of be clear about whom the contributors would be. And once I got that in mind, then I was able to sort of continue to flesh out, my vision for the book.
So it's interesting because you said you have to have the idea of the title ahead of time. Like when I'm writing, the title usually comes later. So it's interesting to think about different people's creative processes. For me, what I always talk about is I have a sentence, that, just one sentence. And then once I get that, and I say the ancestors give me that one sentence, and then everything else flows. So for my chapter, my chapter is chapter 11 in the book, and I got the very first chapter where I was talking about Beyonce and her talking about Oshun and Yemonja. As soon as I got that one, there's a chapter that when I get that first sentence, then everything else, literally the book just flowed from me. The chapter just flowed from me. So that's interesting. I always am interested in people's creative processes. I'm curious about this term that you're using, anti-Black racism. And so I see some people comment, I mean, I know why you're using it, but I just want the audience to be able to hear it, because some people are like, well, what other kind of racism is there? So why anti-Black racism?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And first of all, this notion of anti-Blackness has a long history within Black studies, Africana studies. So it's not something necessarily new. But it sort of resurfaced, if you will, and I attribute that a lot in part to an op-ed that was written by Dr. Kiana Ross. Dr. Kiana Ross is a professor of African American Studies at Northwestern University. She was also a former postdoctoral fellow at my institute that I used to direct, the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis. And so she wrote this brilliant New York Times op-ed called "Call It What It Is: Anti-Blackness." And essentially what she argued, and again, she was writing it in response, particularly to what had happened with George Floyd, but also again Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And so she argued that this idea of racism, while certainly very important, didn't quite fully capture what is happening to Black people today and historically. She argued that the term itself, it kind of defangs, which is an interesting word. It kind of defangs or makes less potent this oppression that Black folks are having. And so she said what it really is anti-Blackness, it's anti-Black racism. And the way that she sort of operationalized that was, it is the degrading, the degradation, the denigration, the complete just disgust that people have toward Black people, toward Blackness. And that to me was so powerful. Disgust, degrading, the denigration that people have when they encounter Black folks and Blackness itself. And to me, that goes beyond this sort of notion of racism, because when you talk about racism, a lot of different types of people and groups experience racism, various forms of racism. Black people are not the only people who experience racism in the main. But this idea of anti-Black racism is really, really particular. It takes on a form that you don't see necessarily with other types of racism. And so for me, anti-Blackness, I think, really captures what we have seen by way of these sort of police shootings, by way of all the other atrocities that Black folks are experiencing, the catching hell that Cornel West likes to say, that we have experienced since the time that we set foot in this country.
And I was interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and someone asked me to define anti-Blackness, and for me, I was saying, okay, I'm going to turn this on its head a little bit, because oftentimes anti-Blackness is like looking at us and our like trying to remove our humanity. And what I said was, I see anti-Blackness as the person that is engaging in anti-Blackness gives up their own humanity in order to engage in acts that are about the destruction and annihilation and ultimately genocide of people of African descent. So they give up their humanity. So it's not about us not being human. The person that is engaging in that behavior is giving up their humanity. And so for me, and then I was saying that to the interview, and she was just like, wow, that really hit. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. When you're engaged in acts of anti-Blackness, you're essentially saying that people of African descent don't have a right to life, liberty, and full humanity in this country. So it's okay to engage in book bans. So people of African descent can't read stuff that is literature from people that look like them. It's okay to engage in voter suppression. It's okay to kill people, extrajudicially kill people, and people then justify those kinds of things. To me, those are examples of someone that is engaged in that behavior, they're giving up their humanity.
They absolutely are. They what they say about us is more of a reflection of who they are and what's happening to them than it says anything at all about us. I mean, that's not a novel thought, but that's absolutely true, and it's particularly given what you just said. But I'm going to be really sort of what is the word here? I'm going to be very real with you. My concerns aren't with those people. So when I'm just going to be real. Like, it's bad that they're giving up their humanity, but that's not where my concern is. My concern is the impact of them giving up their humanity, the impact that it has on our humanity. So I guess for me, the reason why I wouldn't necessarily focus on how it's impacting their humanity is because my concerns lie with our community, and I guess maybe the counselor psychologist in me would perhaps want to sort of try to get them to understand your oppression of us is hurting you. So that's my counselor psychology hat. But my Black nationalist activist hat could give a damn about that. We're dying while they're giving up their humanity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I guess it's just, for me, it's just a reframing. It's not a framing of looking at them. It's like, I'm not going to be saying that I'm inhuman, because I'm not the one that's doing it. So that's all. That's all it is. But talk to me a little bit. And like, notice one of the things that you did with the book, which I think is kind of unique, is that you included student voices. Because oftentimes people focus on academics, and you have multiple chapters that are student voices. And I was like, yes, that's important. Why did you do that?
Well, it's part of it is my pedagogical philosophy, right? So, as a professor, and I've been a professor for 23 years. We oftentimes have to sort of talk about what our teaching philosophy is, and one of the things that I've sort of said is that I don't see myself as this sort of all-knowing, sort of expert that is just simply providing information or expertise to these sort of unknowing, sort of vessels, if you will. Like I see myself as being, a facilitator, and I got this from Baba Asa Hilliard, who was my Jegna. I see myself as really helping to sort of pull out of my students the knowledge that they possess already in many ways. And so for me, we don't take seriously enough the fact that our students have something to say, that our students understand, they know things. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some of the many students that I've worked with over the years, to sort of let them sort of shine, if you will, let them sort of have an opportunity to share what they know. And I think that's important, and I think they very much appreciated that, and I think that we were the beneficiaries as much as they benefited from the experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was looking, because I've had the opportunity to talk to some of your students, and I was like, yeah, I mean, this is great. And I think we need to remember that anti-Blackness happens in all areas of our lives.
Yes.
I mean, you and I both went to the same graduate school. We got our PhDs from the same place. We know that anti-Blackness shows up in graduate school, and so of course students are going to have something to say about that. So that was really powerful for me. The other thing that I was thinking of, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to add that so of the 3 chapters of students, 2 of the chapters were written by graduate students. One of the chapters was written by undergraduate students, and it's almost unheard of to have a chapter written by undergraduate students. And they did such an amazing job. I was so proud of them. The way that they were able to reflect on their own sort of lived experiences, and then tie their lived experiences to their sort of current reality. They did an absolutely brilliant job. Now, I couldn't be prouder of them. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that, because undergraduate students don't have it to shine like that. So okay.
Yeah, no, that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things. And actually those students, so if you all are interested, those students are actually going to do one of these live streams, and so you'll be able to hear those student voices, because I think that that's really important. And in fact, I purposely wanted them to be at the beginning of the series. I wanted them to start the beginning of the series, because I think that we need to hear the voices of the next generation that is coming, because like you said, they have ideas, they know what's going on, and so we need to allow them to lead us into that future.
Yes,
it's funny. So Dr. Cokley, you're apparently popular. I had people texting me. That's why I was looking to the side. They're like, how can I hear Dr. Cokley right now? So I was sending texts to tell people, okay, we're on live now. You can hear him now. I saw that you did this op-ed. I don't know. I don't know if it was the end of last year, and it was specifically answering the question of whether or not there was a connection between critical race theory, which is all the race and the racist circles now, where people are all up in arms, and Black psychology. And so I thought your article was brilliant, and I'm wondering if people are looking at this book that you just recently edited and they're thinking, is this critical race theory? How would you answer that question? Does this have anything to do with critical race theory?
Well, so that's a really, really good question. And, I am one who does not shy away from those words, critical race theory. Now, I'll be clear, because, in a previous op-ed that I wrote for USA Today, I actually sort of wrote about critical race theory. And while I wasn't necessarily trained in the tenets of critical race theory per se, and I don't even necessarily identify myself as a critical race theorist proper, but what it stands for is very consistent with the work that I've done in race for many, many years. So I just kind of wanted to say that. But is my book, could someone look at it and say that it is like a reflection or an extension or a representation of critical race theory? Well, I would not shy away from that characterization if one wanted to do that. I mean, even though that was not part of the overt conceptualization of the book, but it clearly engages in how race, and specifically, Black folks, how we have been systematically oppressed in all these different ways, and whether it's through the criminal justice system, whether it's in education, whether it's in policies, etc. And so if one wants to say that is a reflection of critical race theory, I would not necessarily have a problem with it, even though that was not the explicit conceptualization that I had when I put the book together.
Well, and the thing that I tell people all the time is that, one, I never heard of critical race theory until I had a full PhD. Like, I was out of school. I had not heard of it because it comes from a legal background. So if you're not doing the law, then what? But I do think that it's important to say, I mean, what it's talking about is systemic inequality.
Right.
Okay.
And Black psychologists have been talking about systemic inequality since day one.
Right. And so if somebody were to ask me, are you doing critical race theory? Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in the legal system. So no, technically not that. Am I talking about systemic inequality? Yeah, that's why we have a whole series where we're talking about anti-Blackness and how psychologically you care for yourself when you're dealing with anti-Blackness. What would you say is the reason right now? Like, I mean, I know you talked a little bit about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor at the beginning, but right now, why is this book important for the Black community specifically?
I have two words for you. Mm-hmm. Amir Locke, the brother who was murdered yet again by the Minneapolis Police Department. I got to the point. So I don't know if you've noticed, but you referenced my op-eds, and I've written quite a few op-eds. And I got to the point where I was writing so frequently about the murders of Black folks that I didn't have anything else to say. I'm like, what else can I say that has not already been said? This happens with such frequency. So, so I haven't written about that in a while. But then something will always happen to remind us of where we are and the state of affairs for our people. And lo and behold, Amir Locke. And so to me, this book, I think the fact that Amir Locke was murdered in the way that he was murdered, being a legally possessed, he was a gun holder. He legally possessed guns. He was asleep. You have this sort of no-knock warrant that we know is problematic, that has disproportionately harmed and impacted our people. And even with all of that, these things continue to happen. So this book continues to be relevant because there will be, as much as I hate to say it, Amir Locke will not be the last young brother or sister that is murdered, And so this book, I think, gives us a place to really better understand these, as you put it, systemic inequities that continue to sort of plague our people.
So how do we heal from it?
Well, you're the healer.
You a counseling psychologist too. Don't try me. Yeah. You a counseling psychologist too.
Yeah, but you're actually on the ground level doing the work. You know, I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker. You know, so I write about it, but you're about it. You should ask yourself that question.
So I mean, is it? So, okay, maybe we just think about this together. Is it a multi-level approach? So is it that we continue to write op-eds, scholarly pieces, continue to be teachers and educators in all levels of education, and continue to do the healing work, like the therapeutic work, to heal our people?
I mean, no, that's a place where we have to start. Absolutely. I mean, you know, healing, you know, is painful, and it requires us to go places that aren't easy. And you know, if I could just sort of go make a reference to Sankofa for a moment here. I remember when the movie Sankofa by Haile Gerima, when it came out, you know, years ago, and when it was introduced to the Association of Black Psychologists, one of the things that we talked about was how this movie could be used as a way to sort of start the healing process for African people. That we had to first reconnect and re-experience the trauma of our ancestors before we could sort of go forward. You know, which is sort of, you know, what the Sankofa symbol represents. But there's no healing that can take place without first, you know, really sort of engaging in and experiencing, maybe re-experiencing, you know, the trauma, so that you can sort of, you know, understand it, learn from it, and then sort of grow from it. And so we have to, I think in this historical moment, we have to fully engage in what is harming us. I saw, if I can give this quick example, I don't know if you watch TikTok videos.
You got the young children, young people in your house. I don't have the young ones anymore in my house.
So I do have young ones in the house, and I do find myself watching TikTok, and you know, you can go down a TikTok rabbit hole. There are all sorts of craziness out there. But I came across this video. Actually, it was just today, and because there's a lot of educational content, believe it or not, and I came across this video today, and it was so powerful because it was the sister who interrupted the news conference by the Minneapolis mayor and the Minneapolis police chief, you know, and they were doing their usual song and dance, you know, just sort of like, you know, justifying, rationalizing what had happened to Amir Locke. So this sister just straight up walks up there and interrupts, just stops the show, interrupts them, and just reads them. I mean, just reads them to filth on why it was problematic that they were standing up there trying to rationalize, you know, the death of Amir Locke. And apparently she was someone who had been appointed to a committee that said that whose mission or charge was to do better, that they were going to no longer engage in that sort of problematic behavior. And yet here they are again doing the very things that she said that she was supposed to be a part of to make sure that it did not happen again. So she just read them to filth. And to me, that was such a liberating moment. And she got emotional. She said, he looked like that could have been my son. She said, he looked like my son. And when I saw the video, I mean, I can't even talk about it now without getting teary-eyed, because I mean, how many times does this have to happen before we say enough is enough? And that we have to start, you know, we have a history of disrupting shit. I mean, ABSI, we were created. The Association of Black Psychologists was created because you have black psychologists go to the American Psychological Association and just shut it down and say, you know what, we're tired, we're sick and tired. And so I think part of our healing is going to be involving us engaging in those sort of behaviors where we say, you know what, we are sick and tired, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, of being sick and tired. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm rambling, but like I get emotional when I think about what is continuing to be these acts of genocide against our people.
So, and what you're talking about, what I'm hearing you say is disruption. So you're not rambling. You're talking about disruption in the ways that you know how to disrupt. So this sister was on this committee, and she's charged with making things better, and realizes things aren't better, and so she disrupts the news conference. I think the point that you make about ABPSI, the Association of Black Psychologists, was founded around disrupting the American Psychological Association and this continued coddling, this justification of racism and racist psychological tests. So I mean, it sounds like to me what you're saying is like for people to figure out how they can disrupt the status quo that is damaging within their field. And for me as a psychologist, when I'm thinking of disrupting, I'm thinking, how do I disrupt methods of healing that are not okay for our people? Like, for example, so I'm one of those big people, like the buzzword right now is cognitive behavioral therapy. I love a good cognitive intervention. So if you think it's something that's problematic and make you upset, then I'm gonna need you to change your thinking. I love that intervention. But this idea that that is the only way to heal our people is absolutely problematic. There are lots of ways, through music, through dance, through drumming. I mean, you know these things. Through, I mean, there are different ways that people connect with their ancestors that are healing modalities that had nothing to do with cognitive behavioral therapy. And so for me, disrupting this idea that this one way of doing therapy is the only way is important. And so, I mean, I think that there's a lot that we can do in our fields.
I absolutely agree with you. We have to broaden our notion and understanding of what constitutes healing, and all those modalities that you sort of referenced. We need to be open to that, because I mean, part of that is already happening within our communities. We understand, what we need in many instances, to heal, and so I think our clinical practice needs to catch up with what we already know.
So, is the book healing?
I'd like to think that it has the potential to be healing. I hope that it is healing. I will let other people speak on that, but I hope that it is.
Okay. What chapters would you say? I mean, I know you like all of them, but what chapters really resonate with you from a healing perspective?
Well, I do. I love all of the chapters, and I have the book right here in front of me. So I thought that you might ask me a question like this. I wanted to be prepared. But I think the chapter that for me, I think is especially sort of salient or resonates with me is chapter 10, leveraging the power of education to confront anti-Black racism. And part of that is, again, I referenced Baba Asa Hilliard. Baba Asa Hilliard, was distinguished professor at Georgia State University, where we received our degrees, and internationally known Egyptologist, one of the pioneering thinkers in African-centered psychology. I credit him with the person that I am today, and so he was really, and so my love and fierce defense of Black students comes from him and everything that I learned from him. So this chapter on leveraging the power of education to confront anti-Black racism is particularly resonant with me. And what I love about the chapter is, it tells a story of this school, the Texas Empowerment Academy, and how it sort of came about. It comes about, in part because of the failure of the public school system in dealing with our kids. When the public school system has said, you are uneducable, we can't do anything with you. There's nothing more we can do with you. And they essentially give up on our babies. And so you have these brothers who are like, no, I see potential in every one of these Black students. And so give those kids that you see as irredeemable. Give us those kids that you see and have labeled as being uneducable, and we will show you that we can educate them. And so this chapter tells that story. And the amount of success that they've had, I mean, this is exactly what Baba Asa stood for. I mean, if he's probably smiling, from the heavens now, knowing that this chapter is in his book, because in many ways it is a culmination of sort of the work and that he did and the argument that he made for so many years that our kids have the capacity to learn and to excel, but you have to have the right people. You have to believe in them. You have to have the people who love them and who are willing to invest in them. And this chapter really tells that story.
That reminds me of, for my daughters, they were always in private schools or small schools, small educational environments, or homeschooled. And the one time that I let them go to a larger private elite school with good education, that was like in middle school, and they lasted 2 weeks. They lasted
What?
2 weeks. 2 weeks. Oh yeah, I wasn't gonna pay for racism. That's was not gonna happen. Was not gonna happen.
So you can get
no
racism
money
for free.
coming out of my pocket for racism. No. And I thought it was so interesting because they had come from an environment where people loved them, that looked like them, that cared about them, that were interested in their well-being. And we had this one teacher that was there, and just off the rip, I was like, oh, I got your number, the little racist lady. Okay, so then that was just the end. And I feel fortunate that I had the means and ability and the immediate insight to see, oh, this is racism. Because that can just disrupt children when they're in an environment where people don't believe in their potential. And it was funny because, go ahead.
No, please, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it was funny because my children could immediately see it because they had been in environments where people cared about them. So they were like, oh no.
Well, I mean, like I said, our kids, our students, they know a lot more than what we give them credit for. And they know when teachers believe in them or when teachers do not believe in them. They can sense that they're not stupid. And so you were very smart not to pay for racism, because you can get racism for free. There's no need to pay for it. But no, certainly, the decisions that we make about our kids' education is critical. And so that if I could just share, just if you'll indulge me just for a moment, I want to just share a couple of the stats that I find to be so remarkable about this school, the Texas Empowerment Academy. 100% of their students who took the U.S. history, English, and biology exit test passed. 98% of the kids passed the algebra test. They have kids who have gone on to become incredibly successful. It really is just a remarkable feat that they've done, because again, in many instances, these are kids that the public school systems have given up on. And so now what's happening is people are looking at the success and they're like, how are you doing that? They're like, they're like asking the principal and other leaders of the school to come to try to help them figure out, how do we reach and teach, and maximize the Black children that we have, because we're clearly failing. And it's, look, I mean, Dr. Hilliard would say it's not rocket science. I mean, if you have to, first of all, you need to love these kids. I mean, you can't, you have to know them, you have to love them. You can't teach people, students that you don't know and love. Certainly you can't teach them effectively, and you have to believe in them. And again, our students know, especially whether you believe in them or not. And don't get it twisted. This is not a school that handholds, that pampers them. No, there's some tough love going on, but it's love that's authentic, that the kids know is real and genuine, and they respond to. So I love all the chapters. This chapter especially speaks to me because of my interest in education of our kids.
Okay. So if education is healing for our people, okay, this is the only thing I'm gonna ask about folks that don't like us. So if education is healing for our people, why it don't work on racists? I'm sorry. I just have to ask because people used to like say back in the day, like, oh, it's just about ignorance. No, it ain't. Because some people have read all kinds of books and they still racist.
I mean, don't make me go marimba Ane Yorugu on you. Like, I don't like, I mean, so I'm not even going to go there. So yeah, I thought you would like that reference. I thought you would like that reference.
Fine. Moving on to the next question. But I do want people to think about that. So, I mean, if you think about it, like from our parents' generation, one of the things that people were talking about is this, you know, part of racism is around a lack of exposure. It's around a lack of education. Yeah. No. I mean, when you think about that other individual that was in the White House, that might be, you can make an argument somewhere around there with him. But there was a lot of smart people that were very well read, that understand history. When you think of the guy whose name I won't mention, but did all that harm in Charleston to those African people in that church, he knew the history of Charleston. He knew the history of that church. He knew the significance of that church, and he knew the significance of the Charleston area and the significance of Black people in Charleston. He knew history.
Yes, he did.
Yet was still hateful.
Yes, he did. I mean,
so I think that's something we have to think about. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, many of your listeners might not have caught that reference, but you caught it. And you know exactly where I was going with that. I don't know if we want to delve into that, you know, for the purposes of this discussion. But I will say this. I mean, I do think that you're asking a very important question. And you know, I mean, to be fair, there are some of those folks who I think, you know, are. I mean, you know, if you want to use the word allies, and who certainly understand it and who are trying to sort of, you know, do the right thing. But you're right. Education does not always work. And we have many examples of that. And why that's the case, I mean, you know, that's a deeper philosophical discussion that, you know, probably for another show.
For another time.
I don't pretend to have the answer, an easy answer for that.
Mm-hmm. I like what my colleagues say when we talk about like the folks that are doing this work with us and joining with us, going past being an ally and like posting something online, but being an accomplice, like showing up in spaces where you and I may not show up or may not be heard, and actually like connecting with us. And I mean, and I know that is true for one of the folks that wrote a chapter in the book. So there is can you talk a little bit about that?
You're referring to Annika Olsen, and Annika was the lone white contributor to the book. You know, it was interesting. So, you know, before, I'm currently chair of the Department of Educational Psychology. Prior to being chair, I was longtime director of the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis, which is essentially a Black policy institute situated within Black Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. And as a Black Policy Institute, our charge was to, you know, really engage in issues of public policy issues that impact the lives of Black folks. And so we hired a number of different people to work in that space. You know, Annika, to whom you're sort of referencing, was, you know, one of the individuals that I ended up hiring during my tenure there. And we had certain requirements, you know, to be able to sort of work in that space. And, you know, we were an explicitly sort of social justice oriented, pro-Black, you know, sort of space. And that was an inherent part of our sort of our orientation, our ideology, our philosophy, our values. And so you couldn't work in that space if that wasn't a part of your sort of values as well. I mean, I did all the interviews. And so these were the types of things that I got at, you know, as I was interviewing people. And so, of course, you know, Annika was able to sort of, you know, meet that sort of that bar. But, you know, more importantly, though, she is authentic, and, you know, she doesn't pretend to be someone that she's not. Like, you know, sometimes you'll have white folks, you know, who are so, you know, like they really want to show that they're down, and they sort of act outside of who they really are. And that's not her. She's authentic. You know, she knows she's a white woman. You know, she doesn't pretend to be anything other than a white woman. What she does is she genuinely cares about, our mission. She's committed to, the mission. And so, and she's a very brilliant young lady. And so, I thought that she would, again, it was odd, to have a non-Black person sort of contribute to the book. But I had already had I had many examples of her work that I oversaw, and I knew what her writing was, and I knew what she could do. So I felt comfortable giving her that opportunity to contribute in that way. And I thought she did a really, really wonderful job.
I mean, I was excited about her chapter as soon as I saw it, because I am from Los Angeles. And so when she's looking at like these historic housing inequities, and Los Angeles is one of the places that she was looking at, I'm like, yo, this is dope work. This is the kind of work that we need when we talk about healing. So I think we need all of us. We need our policy folks that can look at stuff, like what are the historic inequities that have been in policy, that have impacted housing, that have impacted the criminal injustice system in this country. We need our researchers like you to be able to give us that data. And we need folks, like me, that are going to, like, when something happens, when a tragedy happens, how do we get the impact out of our body physically and emotionally, work through the impact of those things?
We're all needed.
Yep. I think it's a kind of multi-level perspective. Dr. Cokley, this time is going by really fast. We are kind of at the end.
Okay.
We got 7 more minutes left. Tell me where you want to go. What else do we want to point out about this amazing book, Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I think I think the audience, should know that the book is available for free. Free digital download. So the other thing that attracted me to this project was that fact. I've worked with publishers before, and I've never encountered a publisher that was not driven by profit. This publisher, Cokley, said, you know what? This project is too important. We are not interested in making any profit. We're solely interested and motivated to get the information and knowledge out to the community. And I can't tell you how refreshing it was to me to hear a publisher sort of say that, and then to be a part of that. I think that really, probably as much as anything, sold me on doing it. So for those of you who haven't had the opportunity, the book is available for free. You can get a free digital copy. If you want a hard copy, you can also get a hard copy at a nominal cost. You have to pay for at least shipping and handling, but you can get it at a nominal cost as well. So I want to make sure that your readers know that. The book itself, oh gosh, what else is there to say? I
just put the link in. So if y'all are interested, I just put the link in for people to, you just click on the link and you'll have immediate access to the book.
Yeah. And the book really does sort of represent a diversity of writing style. So for example, you'll have some chapters that have the typical academic prose. You have your references and citations, which is what you're accustomed to seeing. But then you have other chapters that are much more personal. You don't see references or citations because the chapters are really more about the experience, that lived experience. Yeah, and so I love that diversity of sort of writing and approaching this topic because I think it represents our community. Our community is not monolithic, and we need and the book could have been even more diverse than what it is. And so I would encourage people, if you are so inclined, you could write or edit your own book, and if there's some perspectives that are missing from our book, write your own book, edit your own book, and make sure those perspectives are included, because all of these perspectives are important in our liberation.
Yes. Dr. Kevin Cokley, who is the chair of, the chair of the department, University of Texas at Austin.
Chair of the Department of Educational Psychology.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Who is the chair of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. He is also the editor of the recent release text, Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. So Dr. Cokley, this is what we've been talking about the whole time. Dr. Cokley just mentioned that you can get a free copy. I put the link in the chat, so definitely download that free copy. Thank you, Dr. Cokley. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Asante Sana.
So everyone, if you are interested in this book, again, click the link in the chat. Also, if you're interested in the rest of our series, Dr. Cokley was gracious enough to do this intro so you know what the book is about. We have built an entire series that is for 8 months. For the next 8 months, we are going to be talking to all of the chapter authors. We are going to have a ton of things to do. So if you're interested in being able to take care of your body in terms of wellness, listening to the chapters, listening to the authors, and reading along with other people, and then being able to be in small groups to talk about the stuff that you're reading and the impact that it's having on you and the work that you are doing around anti-Blackness and confronting anti-Blackness, then definitely connect with us. I am going to put the link in the chat. So if you are interested in registering for the series, then you can do it there. I want to thank you again, Dr. Cokley, for all the work that you have done and all the work that you will continue to do for the liberation of African people.
Thank you.
And so we are here. We're going to be here every two Fridays out of the month. We'll be here on the 2nd and the 4th Friday. So definitely connect with us. Everyone, take care.